Welcome back to Cosmic Comics. I hope everybody has watched the beginning of the Thanos War and my video on early appearances of Moondragon. If not, feel free to go watch those and read the comics and then come back and watch this. I'll drop a couple of links below. I wanted to jump right back into the Thanos War, but Marvel Comics gives a short intermission to the conflict between issues number 30 and 31 of Captain Marvel Volume 1. Before Captain Marvel gets back into the conflict at hand, he takes on a couple of, let's call them, side quests in Marvel Team Up Volume 1, issues number 16 and 17, published in 1973 and 1974, written by Len Wein, I hope I got that right, and Daredevil Volume 1, issues number 107 and 108, published in 1974 and written by Steve Gerber. Much of the information here is going to be presented chronologically instead of how it is necessarily presented in the comics. Today's conflict begins long ago, somewhere deep within Kree space, where a ship is traveling with a deadly cargo. 2 gems, whose names would be unpronounceable in English, but which translate to the Alpha and Omega Stones. The ship is on its way to destroy the gems in a distant star when one of the crew members, with hopes of striking it rich, assassinates the guards and attempts to steal the gems. He hopes this single heist will allow him to live in luxury for the rest of his life. He manages to escape the mothership with the gems aboard a small life craft, but before he's out of sight of the mothership, his craft explodes. The only explanation we're given is that the power of the gems is even more than a Kree can handle with impunity. The gems drifted in space for some time after that before landing on Earth. Captain Marvel sensed one of the gems on Earth and sent Rick Jones to search it out. We now get a new power from Marvel as he seemingly shares a bit of his cosmic awareness with Rick using their telepathic link. He tells Rick to allow his thoughts to swell within Rick and for Rick to concentrate and to let his mind's eye see the Alpha Stone. Across town, the stone is currently being stolen from a museum by a gentleman who calls himself Elks. While pulling the gem out, he lets us know that he's served time in the past. The crook's full name is Basil Elk. He used to get called Basilisk. He got his name ironically as he was a loser who was known to have a very fearsome glance. While he holds the gem, it begins to pulse and throb in his hands. Before he can explain that any further, he's approached by a guard. He had this heist timed out perfect, and instead of escaping, Basil took a full 5 minutes to sit there with the gem in his hand and gloat. Basil isn't willing to return to jail as a laughingstock. He'd rather take his chances with the guard. As Basil reaches for his gun, the guard fires off a shot. The bullet misses Basil and strikes the Alpha Stone, shattering it. Waves of tremendous force ripple through the chamber, tossing the guard backwards. Afterwards, a changed man stands in Basil's place. He sees the guard reaching out for his gun once more, and not wanting to be killed, he orders the guard to freeze. As a result, beams come forth from his eyes, which freeze the guard in place. Basil sees himself in a mirror and sorts things out pretty quick. He appears to be capable of changing the physical properties of just about anything. This is crazy powerful. He reshapes an ancient suit of armor to make himself into the Basilisk. Peter Parker is walking down the street, ready for a night off at the movies with some friends. As he nears the museum, a wall bursts forth from the inside, and Basilisk comes charging out, shouting about needing to find the other gemstone, which he thinks must be somewhere in the city. Peter jumps a fence and returns as the web-slinger Spider-Man. The quick costume change does get addressed on the next page, as Peter congratulates himself on having gotten his costume change down to a science. Spider-Man wants to discuss the broken museum wall with Basilisk, but the villain just wants to be left alone. He attempts to strike Spider-Man with his eye beams, but Spider-Man's spider sense helps him avoid them and go on the attack. The pole behind Spider-Man that the beam struck has caught fire, and Spider-Man attempts to put an end to this entire conflict by spinning webbing around Basilisk's eyes. This doesn't work, and Basilisk just shoots right through them. Basilisk claims he will succeed where the Kingpin and the Vulture failed, a mighty large claim for a first appearance. Spider-Man is completely down from Basilisk's physical attack on him. Rick races around the corner, and despite Spider-Man previously backhanding Rick's girlfriend when they last met up, he and Marvel switch places and ready themselves to save the day. Marvel introduces himself as he takes Basilisk to the ground, calling him a cretin in the process. Basil is surprised that these new powers must have also increased his intelligence, as he never knew that word before. He then uses his beams to make quicksand in the sidewalk, which begins sucking Marvel into the street. Marvel focuses his internal energies on levitation and successfully frees himself from Earth. Okay, once upon a time, Marvel shot Blast from a wrist-mounted unibeam, but I think this is the first time we have seen Marvel attack somebody with a blast from his wrist while using the negabands. Basilisk is more interested in finding the second gem than fighting off Captain Marvel, so he attempts to flee. This part, you just have to love how crazy this is. Basilisk flies away, but in order to fly, he uses his eye beams for thrust. Yes, this villain has rocket eyes. Marvel pursues, but Basilisk stops him by solidifying the air around Marvel. That is one way to get around having to hit Marvel with a direct attack. Seriously, the Basilisk is so super powerful at this point. Marvel falls toward the Earth, but Spider-Man shows up and tosses some webbing underneath Marvel to stop him from crashing. Marvel then escapes his crystal prison with a solid flex. Spider-Man hopes that this makes the two of them even and wants to know what Marvel might know about the Basilisk. Marvel attempts to explain by telling Spider-Man about the Alpha and Omega stones. Marvel wants to stop Basilisk from finding the second stone. He then shares with Spider-Man that he's capable of following Basil by attuning to the Alpha Stone's vibrations. Spider-Man follows behind Marvel. We switch to New York's financial district, where a security guard complains about his wife's coffee, while Basilisk lands and begins looking for the Omega Stone. The security guard does his job in attempting to stop Basilisk and asking him to leave. In return, Basilisk melts the guard's gun with his eye rays, after which the guard looks ready to flee. Marvel marvels that Spider-Man can keep up with him, even when he is moving at his fastest speed, and Spider-Man chalks it up to practice. As the Basilisk searches for the gem, he can't decide if he would prefer to rule the planet or destroy it. As the Basilisk nears the stone, Spider-Man and Marvel arrive on the scene. I love how Basilisk adapts his fighting techniques in this issue. Instead of going after Spider-Man directly, he uses his beams on the crane that Spider-Man's attached to, making it rubbery. The resulting snap sends the web slinger flying off into the city. Marvel charges in, demanding that Basilisk step back from the pit. When he refuses, Marvel meets him with a forceful punch. As the Basilisk lies on the ground, Marvel attempts to claw through the last few inches of soil. As the Basilisk rises to attack, he's met with a forceful kick from Spider-Man. Marvel instructs Spider-Man to distract the Basilisk while Marvel digs through the soil. Spider-Man seems to have his feelings hurt by Marvel's abruptness, but come on, he's just trying to take care of business. Spider-Man then drops numerous steel girders upon the Basilisk, who barely escapes with his life by jumping out of the way. Meanwhile, we're also told, in addition to his shape-changing ability and increased intelligence, he also has increased dexterity. Meanwhile, Marvel has uncovered the Omega Stone. Just like the Alpha Stone, it too begins pulsing once it is picked up. Marvel, without giving us reason why, thinks to himself that he can see why men have died for this gem. The gem begins to grow. It quickly reaches a size that Marvel can no longer hold it. It grows even larger still, pulling in Marvel's leg, feeding on Marvel's Kree energies to increase its size, and before Marvel can escape, he's encapsulated for the second time this issue. Spider-Man points out that maybe him and the Basilisk don't have anything to fight over anymore. Basilisk turns to see the giant ruby with Marvel inside. He knows something is wrong as the gem shimmers, glows, and then disappears. The Basilisk uses his eye beams to take off, admitting that Spider-Man outsmarted him this time, but he'll be back. Spider-Man is left standing in place, wondering what to do next. He's not sure where Captain Marvel went or what he can do to help him. With the second gem gone, Spider-Man chooses not to chase after Basilisk. In the next issue, Spider-Man goes to the Baxter building to ask for help. After fighting his way through part of the security, Reed shows up and lets Spider-Man in. Once inside, Reed informs Spider-Man that the Fantastic Four is broken up, having gone their separate ways following personal differences. If you want to catch up on that storyline, take a moment to catch my video, Annihilus Strikes Back. Spider-Man makes it clear he's not there for the entire team. He only needs Reed's science mind. He then goes on to relay the history that Marvel told him about the Alpha and Omega Stones, in catching Reed up on recent events concerning Basilisk and Marvel's disappearance. Reed tells Spider-Man that he can't help him, but Spider-Man calls him out. Can't or won't. He goes on to say if that Reed won't help him, then he should go out, dig a hole, and pull dirt on top of himself. Dang, Spidey getting a little harsh there, but maybe Reed needed those harsh words because he agrees to help. One of the inventions that Reed has laying around is a giant tracker of some sort which traces Kree energies. Reed was initially planning on using it to track the Kree sentries he met back to their homeworld. It doesn't take long before Reed discovers that the trail of the Omega Stone leads to the center of the Earth. Spider-Man likes the ride that they take to leave in, but isn't sure how this is supposed to take them to the center of the Earth. Reed knows of a route, the tunnel the Fantastic Four escaped from during their last encounter with Mole Man in Subterranea. Upon leaving previously, this tunnel was blown up, sealing it supposedly forever, but Reed lets us know, nah, the Fantastic Car can clear right through that slag. Soon our heroes have popped out in Subterranea. Once they land, it doesn't take long before they become attacked by a large horde of man-shaped creatures. These guys always look like maggots to me. The battle begins almost at once. There are so many assailants that Reed and Spider-Man are soon overpowered. While the two heroes are held immobile, they are shot with a gas gun. Despite attempting to hold their breath, both soon succumb to the gas's effects, their bodies first stiffening and then growing limp and still. Afterwards, both men are put upon boards and carried through the caverns by the small and silent humanoid creatures. After an indeterminate amount of time, they pass beneath a large, ornately carved granite archway. This portal is the entrance to the Mole Man's throne room. He asks his slaves to bring the prisoners closer. He's happy with his work and notes that his gas will last long enough that neither Reed nor Spider-Man will have an opportunity to interfere with his work. In fact, he tells his slaves to bring the two prisoners along so that they can look upon Mole Man's triumph before being killed. And oh yeah, eat your heart out, Reed Richards. We're told that this chamber is vast enough to contain the Pentagon building, but yet still leave enough room for Manhattan's Grand Central Station. More impressive than the size of the cavern is the machine which fills the space. Mole Man has built a giant laser cannon powered by Earth's magma core. Oh yes, he's had this device constructed for some time now, but is just now going to put his plan into motion. His laser will cut through the Earth's crust like a hot knife through lard. With a laser this powerful at his disposal, he can threaten monuments or entire cities with destruction. The only thing holding him back before now was he needed a giant jewel in order to get the laser to work. We're told that the Mole Man's minions detected the giant gem and retrieved it, but we're not told how, as Marvel and the gem both seemingly disappeared into thin air, and even Mole Man refers to his minions as mindless. All the same, he was surprised to find Captain Marvel imprisoned within the gem. The first time the laser is fired, the concentrated energies will disintegrate Captain Marvel. Now that Mole Man has shown off his plan, he's ready to kill Reed Richards and Spider-Man and tells his slaves to dump both of them into the magma pits. As our heroes speed towards the magma, they both spring into action. Spider-Man first, making a trampoline from his webbing. Reed Richards proceeds to save himself, while Spider-Man lets us know that it was Reed's idea to pretend to be sleeping. Our heroes escape the lava, but are being tailed by Mole Man's servants. As a near infinite number of creatures closes in on our heroes, the narrator tells us that their odds of surviving are just about zero. And then something changes. A blinding shaft of energy transforms the advancing horde into an elaborate glass structure. A second beam comes forth, shattering the shards, destroying the army. Mole Man is impressed. He didn't realize that Reed Richards brought a third down here with him. As our heroes turn around, they see who saved them. The Basilisk. He lets Reed Richards and Spider-Man know to keep their distance or face the same fate. Spider-Man has no problem with that, but wants to know how the Basilisk found them. Turns out that the Basilisk never fled far after being defeated at the construction site, and followed Spider-Man, knowing that he would attempt to find a way to free Captain Marvel. He then followed Reed and Spider-Man from the Baxter building to Subterranea. I have to love where Basilisk takes the time to point out that if he hadn't followed them, both heroes would be dead right now. He doesn't get a very warm welcome for his troubles. Spider-Man seems to think this is a ploy for the Basilisk to kill them off himself, while Reed follows Spider-Man's lead and seems itching for a fight. Mole Man, having just seen his army shattered, comes in acting pretty dang cocky. He wants to know if the Basilisk isn't there to fight beside our heroes, why did he show up? Basilisk points to the Omega Stone and claims that it belongs to him, his key for gaining his ultimate power. Upon hearing this, again, Mole Man sends his army out. It looks as though there are just as many as there were before. Basilisk starts blasting through the crowd and finally confirms what has been hinted at all along. His Eye-Ray's abilities are molecular transmutation. And more than that, it can also emit unyielding force. I have to tell you, this guy has the most amazing eyes. The two bad guys are fighting while on the other side of the pit, giving our heroes an opportunity to attempt to save Marvel. As the villains battle, Mole Man's army is still proving to be ineffective against Basilisk. Mole Man himself enters the battle with a flying leap. Basilisk doesn't understand how he can't hit Mole Man with his eye beams. Mole Man lets him know that it's because of his radar sense, before striking him with his staff. When we switch back to our heroes, we find them pounding on the stone in vain. The two of them need to find a way to shatter the gem. Reed has an idea, but it's risky. Spider-Man tells him to try it. It's at this time that Mole Man and Basilisk notice that the heroes are attempting to thwart both of their plans. The two agree to work together to stop them. Mole Man strikes Reed Richards, and the Basilisk hits Spider-Man. The two of them take a moment to compliment one another on their fine work, and Mole Man points out that the heroes weren't killed, but they should be down long enough for the villains to sort things out. Mole Man turns to kill the Basilisk and is shocked to discover Basilisk giving him a big eyeful of red rays. What happened to those radar senses? Basilisk then flies in towards the laser to claim the Omega Stone. Throughout the entirety of the conflict, unbeknownst to all, Marvel has been attempting to bring his wrists together. He does so at long last. As he does it, the cavern is filled with a bright flash of light. Without the ability to feed off of Marvel's Kree energy, the Omega Stone returns to its original size. Rick Jones says that he would have been there sooner, but moving inside of the stone is like swimming through frozen molasses. Basilisk is ready to act the part of a tough guy once more, but the entire cavern begins falling apart. Turns out, Reed's plan was to have the laser machine create an energy feedback loop before he was taken out. It's just now kicking into high gear and will collapse the cavern within minutes. Rick attempts to get out of there as quickly as possible while Basilisk continues chasing the Omega Stone. As he reaches towards the stone, a wave of lava splashes above his head, but we aren't shown what happens next. As everything collapses, Mole Man calls for our heroes to save them, but as the cavern falls down, the opportunity is lost. Rick Jones exits with Reed Richards and Spider-Man in the Fantastic Car via the same passageway they entered. Once outside, Rick Jones asks to be dropped off. When asked why, he explains that he was on his way out to the other coast before getting dragged into this mess. He then switches back into Captain Marvel. As Captain Marvel flies away, he tells Reed and Spider-Man that Captain Marvel has work to do in San Francisco. Captain Marvel's story picks back up where I left off in Daredevil Volume 1, Issue number 107. We left off in San Francisco, where an officer had just rushed into police headquarters to tell Moondragon, Daredevil, Black Widow, and Officer Carson that Captain Marvel has arrived and is fighting Terrex. Officer Carson then offers to fly our heroes to the scene using Commissioner O'Hara's helicopter. In our first panel of this conflict, something doesn't ring true. Terrex is saying to Marvel, "So, the Titans themselves sent you to stop me, did they?" This lets the reader know that Mentor and/or Arrows sent Marvel on this mission. The big question is, how does Matt Murdock's boss, who is melded with the beast Terrax, know who the Eternals are? It seems as though the newly born Terrex is the one who holds this knowledge, as he wants to know if the Eternals have forgotten that his is the ultimate power. Also indicating that Terrex may have fought the Eternals in the past. All will be revealed. Marvel reinforces this idea, letting us know that the Titans took the time to teach Marvel a few things about this ancient foe. Marvel has learned that Terrax has to focus on a target in order to use his powers. Marvel is currently moving too fast for Terrax to land a blow. Terrax knows speed isn't his strong suit, so he asks his buddy Ramrod to help him out. Ramrod proves that he's fast enough to catch Marvel as he lands a punch to the gut using his head. This issue is one of the first times we get to see Marvel leaning more towards being a protector rather than a warrior. As Ramrod continues to attack, Marvel never goes on the offense. Instead, he continues to use Ramrod's own attacks and momentum against himself. Even towards the bottom of the page, where it appears that Marvel punches Ramrod, we see him saying, "You ran right into that one, Ramrod." Marvel is ready for this portion of the conflict to be over and calls for Ramrod to meet him out on the streets. Once out on the streets, Marvel continues to goad Ramrod, as Ramrod gives a full-on bull charge towards Marvel. And as he's closing in, Marvel slaps his wrists together, blinding Ramrod. It appears as though Ramrod might have actually run right through Marvel, but then again, we know that Marvel can move extremely quick. Either way, the result is Ramrod crashing through the wall. Rick stops to check out the situation and finds that Ramrod has been knocked unconscious. He points out that Marvel sure does cause a lot of destruction for somebody who is committed to non-violence. It's nice to again see another recognition of that non-violent approach. Rick then calmly walks away from the destruction, whistling. Rick is feeling a little stressed out at the moment and decides to stop for some ice cream while noting that even though the threat of Terrex looms large, most people are just going about their business, as we can tell by the name of the 3 ice cream flavors that Rick is given to choose from. As Rick starts to eat his ice cream, Marvel comes in raging, reminding Rick that, hey, the real battle against Terrex is yet to come, but Rick just looks bored. He tells Marvel that he'll let him loose once they've had a chance to relax. He points out, hey, we've been on the move since that Kree Jules case, referring to the Alpha and Omega Stones. Shockingly, Captain Marvel agrees with Rick, pointing out that he had his metamorphosis shortly before that. What is going on here? They have 1 hour to respond to Terrex's demands, and they're all just like, hey, maybe now's a good time for a vacation. Before Rick can finish his first scoop of ice cream, Rick hears the sounds of a helicopter. As the copter lands, the rest of our heroes get out, and Rick attempts to move in towards the crime scene that he just left, but is stopped by police. Rick decides to let Daredevil snoop around a little bit before calling in Marvel. Now we move on to something completely different. I really thought he would have realized before now, but Angar has just now discovered that his girlfriend Janice was killed by Terrex. Angar is overcome with grief and reflects that he should have listened to Janice when she told him that this wasn't the way. All Angar ever wanted was a world of love. Poor guy is still just a big hippie at heart. He goes in to give Janice one last hug, and she turns to dust in his arms. Janice is ash, just like our hopes, our dreams. Angar, the Screamer, master of the Mind Storm, leaves ready to make Terrax pay and is prepared to go on the attack. Back at the print shop where Ramrod knocked out a wall without any signs of Captain Marvel, Daredevil suggests taking on Terrex themselves. Moondragon and Black Widow think that is a horrible idea, and both back the idea of surrendering the city to Terrax, but, only in order to buy them enough time to come up with a better plan. Daredevil gets a little upset over Black Widow having changed her mind about surrendering, pointing out that when he made the same suggestion, she wasn't on board. Daredevil explains that they are dealing with a maniac who will wipe out the first signs of rebellion. This short but emotional speech by Daredevil is enough to convince Rick, who is listening in, to unleash Marvel. He slaps his wrists together and releases the Kree Protector. Daredevil registers the activity as a possible attack. He turns and demands that they identify themselves. Marvel wants to know if this is his customary greeting for a friend, as Moondragon points out that, hey, that's Captain Marvel. Daredevil is embarrassed that his blindness almost cost them an ally. Moondragon covers for her friend, blaming it on severe strain. She wants to know if Marvel was sent there by the Titans. Marvel, hearing of the Titans, correctly surmises that she must be Moondragon. Black Widow is shocked to learn that Moondragon's story is real. Wow, she didn't believe her? We then get the same backstory we've gotten on Thanos several times now. Thanos rules Titan, but only through brute force. And hold up. Marvel then tells us that Thanos went on to conquer other worlds. What? This goes against the entire premise of the Thanos War, whereby Thanos takes over Titan and then he wants to finish ruling his home solar system before moving on to the rest of the universe. He then goes on to tell us that Thanos is here looking for the Cosmic Cube, despite the fact that, chronologically, Marvel would know that Thanos has already found the Cosmic Cube. Finally, we're given the connection between the Titans and Terrax. a scientist on Titan created Terrax to be used as a doomsday weapon. If Thanos were to win, the plan was the Titans were going to unleash Terrax to destroy all life on Titan and rob Thanos of any victory he might have. Wow, just a total, like, if you can't have it, nobody's gonna have it. Raise the fields kind of an approach here. Thanos' attack came on sooner and swifter than they ever imagined. The scientist who created Terrex attempted to release him, but perished before he could do so. Only one other scientist on the planet understood the science behind the beast. Moondragon then admits that, yes, it was she who brought Terrax to Earth without knowing it was indestructible. Marvel corrects Moondragon. Terrax can be defeated, but one just needs to find his opposite. If Terrax is life, then they need to fight him with unlife, just like antimatter, but for life. Yeah, sure. Black Widow requires a better explanation. After all, isn't death the opposite of life? No, because death is merely the absence of life. Okay then, Black Widow wants to know what unlife is. Marvel sticks his finger in the air and comes across as somewhat uppity when he tells her that he can't explain it to her, and that it's unobtainable for now anyway. Instead, he suggests that they focus on Kerwin Broderick. Marvel somehow knows that the key to beating Terrax is in defeating Kerwin. This is just sad. The lawyer at Matt Murdock's law firm that has been working under and sticking up for Kerwin is Jason Sloan. What's funny is Kerwin seems genuinely excited to see Jason, but Jason has finally had enough. He comes out in an attempt to stop Kerwin. He asks him to stop before pulling out a gun and firing several shots at Terrax. Once he realizes that bullets won't hurt his former boss, he then falls to his knees and begins begging for Terrax to kill him. Kerwin finds this amusing and tells Jason instead of begging for his life to pretend he's a jury and enter a plea. At that moment, another voice comes onto the scene telling Jason to stand up. It's Matt Murdock. Kerwin is shocked to see Matt arrive to confront him. Our heroes have a plan, and so far everything is working out. But then Matt picks up another heartbeat running up, one that he recognizes. That of Angar. Kerwin is pleased at what he assumes to be an ally coming to his aid. Angar corrects him, letting him know that he's there to extract his revenge upon Terrax for killing Janice. Angar screams, and reality shudders. Our heroes recover relatively quickly, but Kerwin and Terrax are having a hard time with the strain. Daredevil decides to increase the stress by moving in to attack. Not attempting to hide his prowess, Matt swings into action dressed in his street clothes. Captain Marvel and Black Widow follow his attack, stopping Terrax from concentrating long enough to use his powers on any one foe. Jason Sloan doesn't have any explanation as to how Matt is moving the way he is, so he assumes it's all part of Angar's LSD hallucination trip. Captain Marvel sees a way that they can defeat Terrax, but he needs Angar to project a certain illusion. Angar tells Captain Marvel that he can't control what people see when he screams. Moondragon lets him know that he'll be able to with her help. Together, they will create the illusion of unlife. Moondragon warns Angar that she's about to enter his soul, and he reports that the experience makes him feel dizzy, like he's strung out on downers, and then he begins tripping out. He doesn't want to see whatever Moondragon is showing him as he screams. As Angar screams, a black rain obliterates everything from view until the entire world is blotted out. Angar continues to scream. Out of the darkness, Terrax comes clawing towards them. Without light or life, Terrax is stumbling towards the edge of madness. In the gray darkness comes forth an egg, the universal symbol of life. Terrex is pleased to have something, anything to lash out at. His fist smashes the shell, and from within pours forth another void. He is covered in an inky blackness. The egg, whose unfertile yolk spawns oblivion, is the horror called unlife. If I read this right, it seems as though Angar may have actually created unlife with Moondragon's help. Afterwards, we get a surprisingly peaceful scene. Kerwin lies dead upon the ground, and Terrax is nowhere to be seen. Moondragon lets everybody know that Angar is no longer the Screamer. Performing this last task took all of his powers away. Matt Murdock wants to know what Terrax saw that could have been so terrifying. Marvel, being coy, says that he can't tell him out of fear that Matt would laugh. Not cool, Marvel. Not cool. Marvel insists that he needs to leave due to other pressing matters. As Marvel flies away, Black Widow marvels after him, but Captain Marvel is more impressed by the blind crime fighter called Daredevil. One might wonder how long it is before Marvel eventually gets back to the Thanos War. We can try to contextualize this into a timeline by looking at the events beginning in Daredevil Volume 1, issue number 108, published in 1973 and written by Steve Gerber. It's Christmas Eve, and Daredevil is headed downstairs after an argument with Black Widow over a disagreement about the appropriate use of force. Notice that the title page of the comic has switched from Daredevil and Black Widow back to Daredevil, the man without fear. Anyways, he comes down the stairs, and we learn that it's been a couple of months since the conflict with Terrex. Moondragon is decorating a Christmas tree as he enters. She can tell that he's stressed and wants to know if he'll let her use her mental powers to help him relax. Daredevil sees that an old friend of his has been shot, so Moondragon offers the services of her spacecraft to take Matt to New York City. On the way to New York, Moondragon explains the triangulation for the navigation of their trip, while Daredevil brings up another form of triangle. Moondragon tells him to stop beating around the bush and lets him know that he's attempting to tell her that he's strongly attracted to her. She lets him know that she's known this since shortly after they first met and she probed his psyche. Moondragon admits that since that time she has been drawn to him in a similar fashion, but insists that now is the time for the two of them to forget that infatuation. Daredevil seems shocked and claims that doing so isn't going to be so easy. He wants to know if there's a reason why this can't work. Moondragon has a great answer. These two are worlds apart, or as she calls it, their respective orientations. He's an Earth boy, and she's been changed by her time on Titan and destined for the stars. Despite having come to love Daredevil, she recognizes that their love was never meant to be. The rest of the trip continues in silence until they arrive in New York. Once there, both understand that this is goodbye. Daredevil wants to know where she's headed next. She lets him know that she's leaving for deep space to meditate and be free of heart. They embrace, and as he leaves, Daredevil says a quick goodbye, but Moondragon says nothing. And with Captain Marvel's brief intermission from the Thanos War, and us taking the time to catch up on Moondragon, we're now ready to discuss the finale of the Thanos War. Thank you for watching Cosmic Comics. Feel free to hit any of those buttons below. I'm out.